Welcome to an all-new episode of the Workshoot Wrestling Podcast. This is Corey Richmond, joined by Jason Brooks. It's an instant reaction to night 2 of Wrestlemania 37. Jason, how you doing today? And did you enjoy night 2 of Wrestlemania?
I did. It's funny on Twitter at WorkShootPod, and we'll talk about night 2 here. There are a lot of complaints. A lot of people didn't like it. I don't really know where that was coming from. I thought night 2 was really solid. I thought it was a really good night of wrestling, except for the first 2 matches, obviously. I don't think there were any real weak spots. So I'm surprised at the hate for night 2, but we'll kind of get into it.
Yeah, I can see that. But like what you said, though, right off the top, the first 2 matches, that's basically which was the first hour of the show, was pretty disastrous, I think, in a lot of people's mind, and mostly left a bad taste in people's mouth. So, when you start off that way, and when night 1, you just start off really hot with that world title match, and I think that it most likely where you left, night 1 with the monumental win from Bianca Belair, and you start with the Fiend, I think it's going to hurt. But I do agree with you. I mostly think night 1 was an overall better show. But night 2 was the slow progression of everything led to the next match being better. I don't know how much you would say Apollo Crews versus Big E with the progression of match by match. I think every match, for the most part, got better as the night went along. And as you got to the last 2 matches, they got to a stride, and those 2 matches really delivered. When your 2 main matches deliver, I would say it's a successful show.
Yeah, no, I think I think it was a good WrestleMania. I think some of these WrestleManias that are these 8-hour slogs have been a little rough the last few years. I feel like before, last year with the 2-night thing. I think these 8-hour shows were a little rough. Things were gone too quick, and then it was just rough. And I think these 2 nights, it might be a formula for what they need to do. Too bad Bayley can't get on, even in 2 nights, but we'll kind of get to that.
Yes, I think the high point of WrestleMania night 2 was the main event, the 3-way. But I really do think that the Kevin Owens Sami Zayn match was put at exactly the right point, because with those first 2 matches being such slogs, if that match did not deliver, I think we would have had a disaster of a night. That match, you have 2 professionals, 2 guys who know each other, who've been feuding with each other as friends and enemies for over a decade, knew exactly what that crowd needed and really got people into that match. And yes, you had the Logan Paul stuff that nobody, like the average wrestling fan.
Well, no, I think the Logan Paul stuff was fun. It was the stuff in the end. It didn't take anything away from it.
Right.
It was fine. They just showed him, but the crowd didn't even know that. I don't think that had anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, I think that got them more into it. I think they wanted to see him get stunned. So as a matter of fact, I think he did add something into the match in that he got stunned. And I think people wanted to see that. It's funny because I think that match was solid, but I think people were so upset with the first 2 matches that any match that was good, they would have said that's match of the year. People were like, that match was great. I thought it was a good match. I think when you've compared to some of their Ring of Honor matches, even their NXT feud, I don't think this hit the heights of that. But I thought it was a really good, well-worked match. And also, what a dope moment for those 2 guys. 2 best friends who have known each other for 15 years, have been on the road together, have wrestled each other a million times, have tagged a bunch. And to be on that stage at WrestleMania was pretty incredible for those guys. Didn't matter who really won or lost.
Absolutely. And I think that all weekend we heard rumors that, Becky Lynch might be returning. And, this is the first year we did not have a Triple H, or, some people were, hoping that, at a John Cena, even though we were told for months that he wasn't going to be there, or a Brock Lesnar, or, a much lesser extent to Goldberg. There were no major surprises, but I think the quality of the second half of the show was so good that it was okay. I think that WrestleMania, you expect surprises, but the quality was strong enough that even though we were hoping that a Becky Lynch return or a Charlotte or something like that didn't happen, at least for me, I wasn't upset.
No, it was fine. I would have liked to have seen one or two surprises, and I guess we did kind of get that with the Dabi Kato, whatever that guy's name is from
Complicated, yeah.
Raw Underground. But yeah, no, I was expecting a surprise. And especially with the rumor mill that we heard there might be a surprise. And I know Nick Khan, president of the WWE, said that Becky and Ronda may be back soon. So I think we were expecting a surprise, and didn't get it. But I think that's okay. I think the reason why a surprise would have been good though is because, especially on night two, people said the matches weren't as good or boring or whatever. I don't know what they were watching, but I do think the crowd maybe from night one to night two wasn't as energetic. And I do think a big surprise or two to catch them off guard, I think may have really been helpful in kind of keeping the crowd going rather than just having like match after match after match.
Mhm.
So I think that would have been helpful. They didn't go that route. I'm sure they're saving it for the Thunderdome, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's kind of my other thing. We're saving this for the Thunderdome, but again, TV is king, right? So that's where their audience lies. So we'll kind of see what happens with that.
I mean, like you said, rights fees is that all that really matters for every company nowadays. I mean, I do think that it was a little weird the fact that, and this is not in a bad way, but we finally got what we always want. We got young stars came out and were developed over these
Yeah.
last couple of days.
Absolutely.
Rhea Ripley, and especially on the female side of it, Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair are, at least in my opinion, especially by the reaction we had of the fans, they're stars now. And they're young. They're under the age of 30. Something that we complained about, and it was me more than I think you. I mean, you weren't happy about it, but in the men's Royal Rumble this past year, there was two guys that were under the age of 30 in the Royal Rumble, and the big stars that were on this show, the Roman Reigns, Rhea Ripley, and the Bianca Belair on night one are all under the age of 35, and two of them are under the age of 25.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think in terms of the women, they have done a good job of developing women talent. They really have. And it was great to see. I think, with Apollo Crews, I think he's someone who and we speculated about this, right? We thought Crews would win the match because they kept having him lose. You figured to have his moment. And
Six straight times, yeah.
and you talk about, and we'll get into that when we talk about the match, but we talk about protecting. They protected the hell out of him. But good to see Apollo Crews get his shine. So yeah, they really did a good job of not the same old, same old. There were new stars highlighted in this, in these two nights, and I think that's something really good to see, and something that you can, as much as we rip WWE, it's definitely a positive you can take for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so let's kind of talk about this card as a whole.
Sure.
Do you think that when you look at this card, do you think that it was the right idea what they did tonight or what they did on night one? Like I said before, night one, they started off, and I know they had it was pre-scheduled that you were going to have the world title match as your first thing, and it started off hot. But on night two, you had The Fiend and Randy Orton, then the women's tag team match, where both matches were thought of as the two weakest matches on the show, and they wound up being the two weakest matches.
Yeah,
I like slow.
I like having a hot opener. I think they probably should have started with Kevin Owens and then maybe gone to the women's tag. I mean, that problem is when are you going to put that in? The other big problem is, to be honest with you, they could have put that in at any time and it would have slowed the crowd down. Like, it was so long, but I think it would have been better off to start with Owens and Zayn and really get the crowd hyped and, the stunner and things like that. So I do think they kind of missed the mark there, but I did note this on Twitter at Work Shoot Pod. I almost feel like it was like the pre-show. Like, I feel like those matches were like the pre-show, and then I was like, even though they hyped Bray Wyatt, Orton, I mean, that's one of the longest. I think that was the longest feud that they've told on WrestleMania. That being said, it still felt like a pre-show match. So did the women's tag match. So, I think they probably should have started with Owens and Zayn, but I do get where they were going, because then after those matches, it was like, okay, now we just got a regular pay-per-view. So really, it could have gone either way. I think maybe they should have started with Owens and Zayn, like I said.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's hard to judge what the best idea is for that, because I really do think going with night one strategy, which they did, and I discussed this with Christopher Morin last night on the Morning's Law podcast. And once again, thank you very much, Chris, for having me on to talk about the show. We went and had an interesting discussion on, do you start with that super hot match, or do you put a world title match as a double main event like they did tonight? And I really think it worked well on both ends, either putting it at the beginning or having a double main like he did tonight with Rhea Ripley in that co-main event. That really, worked out well. But, I think the crowd, even though they got a good reaction with Randy Orton, and people, unlike us, people are interested in The Fiend, I just think that with all the goofiness of the Fiend angle and him getting, burnt alive for 4 months and all the other ridiculous stuff, and then he winds up losing, and all the theatrics of that match, it just kind of took, I think, people out a little bit. And then having, like you said, the tag team women's match, which everyone in that match worked in their own level of working hard. Maybe, Nia less than others because she can barely move.
Well,
I just
yeah.
think, it didn't work for me. And I think that when you were
Well,
saying,
I mean, it didn't work for you because the matches sucked. I mean, let's be honest. The matches weren't good. So, I mean, that was a big reason why it didn't work for you, which I get too.
and like when the women's tag team title match is 14 minutes long, and it's the third longest match on the show, that's a problem.
Well, let's get into these matches one-on-one here.
Okay.
All right. So the Randy Orton match, I don't know. I'll let you kind of preview these matches. I don't know. I don't think it was that bad of a match
Because it was short.
I think it was one of Bray Wyatt's best matches since he's been the Fiend. Now, that's not saying a lot because it wasn't good, but I think compared to other Bray Wyatt matches, it wasn't bad.
Well, one of the things that I left it up to you, at Work Shoot Pod on Twitter tonight, to go and be our social media ambassador, to put it nicely. I was on my own Twitter, Paladin 808, which nobody has to follow, of course. But I wrote basically 3 words all night before my phone died earlier. I wrote, I think it was Return of the Red Light. And I, hashtag Wrestlemania. Me on my known thing, no one's going to, follow me. But you know what? I got like 6, retweets out of that. Please, do we never get that to come back? First of all, the match was terrible. Yes, it was only like 5 minutes worth of time of actual in-ring, but the match wasn't very good. This is the second time we've seen it in WrestleMania, and it's the third time we've seen it, in the last couple of months. I don't know why the storyline's still going on. I'm sure that Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt are friends in real life, and they think that they have good chemistry. They want to work together and help each other out. But especially when you're in front of a live crowd, you're no longer doing cinematic matches. This doesn't work for me. And the Jack in the Box thing didn't work for me. I mean, the theme of this match is it didn't work for me, and the red light doesn't work.
But I think, Corey, here's the problem. This has been all of his matches. Some people have said this on Twitter, and I forget who said it. Maybe what we need to do is not get rid of the Fiend.
Oh no,
have the Fiend, but have the Fiend be a special character, kind of like the Demon with Finn Balor, right? We have to kind of stop having this. These Fiend matches are horrible. They've all been bad. He's a supernatural guy, and then he gets beat with an RKO. He seems to lose all these matches, even though he's a supernatural demon or whatever. Michael Cole is always screaming out of his mind, doesn't know what to call him. I just don't think they have, with The Undertaker, when The Undertaker was, the theatric Undertaker before he kind of, before Attitude Era, they did a good job of not going overboard with him, I felt like. And maybe it's revisionist history. But I feel like these Bray Wyatt feuds, it's just the same stuff. Like it's every match is the same, pretty much. It's very, very formula heavy. And I don't know. I think at some point they have to look into separating this. People on the Wrestle Life chat were like, maybe there'll be some Alexa Bliss Fiend intergender match. It's like
Why?
where is this where is this going? But to your point, people were into it. The Fiend got a lot of cheers. So people do like it. And we also sometimes have to, I do this thing where I think about wrestling through my own eyes, right? And sometimes I don't do a great job of stepping back and looking at wrestling through people who don't watch it every week like we do. And so there's a chance that people like the Fiend still. So, it was what it was, but I thought the ending was bizarre. I just it does so little for me. It just doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't even do anything for the Fiend either. But like I said, it is what it is.
And just quickly, in the Facebook group, we've had a couple of comments. Jacob Anthony Moses from the Step Back podcast, which you can listen to during this at the moment every Friday night at 7:00, agrees with you. That makes a lot of sense. That Fiend maybe should be a once in a while, like the demon type of character. It should just come out. And also Jackie Endy, who actually watched a couple of minutes of pay-per-view tonight, said the Fiend looks slightly ridiculous on a poster versus another human being. Excellent point. And of course, check out Jackie Endy, Jackie Rachel, and not Jackie Corey every week or every bi-weekly right now on the You Don't Know Jackie podcast. An extremely funny podcast, comedy-wise. But let's get into the second match on the show, the tag team title match for the women. I thought this match, everyone besides Nia worked hard. I mean, Nia, I guess, maybe worked hard, and she thought she worked hard, but I thought the Riot Squad should have won the night before. I thought they would have had a better match. I mean, it's always nice for Natalya to finally have her moment, but it's time to just move on from the tag team titles that are going on right now with your champions, with Nia Jax. She just can't work. I don't care if she's The Rock's cousin. You got to do something better with Shayna Baszler. Jay, if you have more comments, I just want to see someone else have these titles because they're just not good.
Yeah, I mean, I predicted that whoever won the tag team turmoil, which I think I said was Natalya and Tamina, would win the match. I mean, and another thing I said, right? The most protected people on the WWE are Charlotte, Roman Reigns, Lashley, and Nia Jax. I think Nia Jax is the tag team champion just so Shayna can take any of the losses they have. I don't think she's lost a match, and I can't remember the last time she's lost a match. It is really, really incredible. She's so bad. She is so bad. When she did that splash to Tamina, and it took like 5 minutes for her to do the splash. I don't get it. I don't get what Vince sees in her. It doesn't make any sense to me. We talk about this every week, but that was indicative. It was not a good match. And Nia Jax was a big part of that reason. Big part of the reason why the match wasn't good. And why was it so long? I get, because they had so few women's matches. When they do have a women's match, I think they want to like highlight it. But man, they really, really did a very, very poor job. The match was just way too long. The spots didn't really make sense. It really just dragged. It really dragged. It felt like it was like a 45-minute match.
It's 14 minutes and 18 seconds.
Yeah, the longest 14 minutes. It was 14 minutes too long.
I mean, this is one of those things where this match should have been like, I'm not saying you make it 3 minutes long, but this could have very easily been like 6 minutes. You take 8 of those minutes and you add like another 3 or 4 to Kevin Owens' match. You add another like 2 minutes to Apollo Crews' match. You could have evened this out, and some of these other matches could have gone a little bit longer, and they may have reached a stride, maybe some, another level. But it'll be interesting to see where they go from here with the tag team titles. Do we have a return? Do we have maybe someone from NXT get a promotion up? I mean, we'll see where they go in the coming weeks on what they do with these titles. But like I said before, they have to figure out a way to move on from Nia Jax.
Yeah, but they're not going to. I mean, I think, right, that's the thing. They're not going to. So we just have to see if they're going to have somebody else win these titles at some point. They haven't. I mean, they had Natalya and Tamina looking strong. They've been building them up for a couple of weeks, and they had them look strong, and they lost. So maybe it's a Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch return. Like, I don't know, but it's going to have to be something probably pretty big because they've had the titles for a long time.
Now, the only we're moving on from this match, going on to Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. But one thing I wanted to bring up, and this is a 2-night problem, something that you brought up actually on Friday when we did our last show, that you had a big problem in regards to AEW with the build for Cargo versus Red Velvet, on the idea that, we're calling every woman in the company bitch every 3 seconds. I don't know if you caught this, but I heard at least like 4 times in this match. And then in a couple other matches, everyone's calling each other bitch every 3 seconds. I know it wasn't the focal point as it was in the AEW build for, like I said, in the Red Velvet match. But, can we kind of get rid of, like what you said on our last show? But
yeah, I think I
heard that even more over the last 2 days.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm more okay with it in the heat of the heat of the battle. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't think it's necessary, and I think that I think it's something that needs to be cut out. Say you're the baddest MFer, like, and let them bleep it out or whatever. Like, we don't have to just keep referring to women as a, it's one of the reasons why Becky Lynch got so popular. She called herself "I'm the man," So anyway, it is what it is.
Absolutely. And like I said, you mentioned this earlier, the moment that this pay-per-view turned around and got back on track, you had Owens versus Sami Zayn. Not a lot more to say than we've said already, but it was, like I said, the turning point on this show. 2 guys know each other really well. Logan Paul was used well. He had, for a guy who, I don't really know much about, because I'm not, a social media maven. Apparently he's got 29 million followers, I guess, on Twitter or Instagram. Good for him. Some of his guys, if they want to follow us, that's great. Work Shoot Pod. But, I thought his facial expressions and actually apparently looked like he cared was great. That's all you really want from a celebrity, if they're just going to be there. I thought that we got our moment of, him, having the interaction with Sammy and then getting stunned. I thought all of that worked out well. I would have actually kind of liked to have seen Sammy actually get a win in this situation, due to the fact that, he, at some point, I know that WrestleMania and at the end of a storyline, the babyface usually wins. But I think it would have been good for Sammy's character at some point for him to actually stand on top, and so he can move up, because I think that Kevin Owens can lose for the next, we always say, like, these over guys can lose for the next 6 years and it doesn't matter. They get 1 win. I think Sammy's at a point right now where if he doesn't start winning some of these matches or feuds, he's just going to become a little bit more like just another guy. Maybe you disagree, Jay, but I feel like he's at a point in his career where he needs to win some of these feuds and have that big moment. And WrestleMania kind of felt like a time where he could have done that.
I don't know if I agree with that. He won the IC title last year, didn't he? So yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think he loses a lot more than he wins.
And I know he's
I think he's always a guy who can get himself over because he's so good on the mic. Mm-hmm. And he has good matches. So I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. This isn't like Cesaro that first night who needed to beat Rollins. I don't think it's like that. I think it's okay either way. I think they needed to get to Logan Paul getting stunned. I think that's what they needed to get to. That didn't really matter who won or lost. I think it obviously made more sense for Owens to win. And that's probably why they chose to have him win, to be honest with you. They needed Logan Paul to get stunned. That was important. And so that's what happened. I thought it was a good match, like I said. I think Sami Zayn's fine taking the loss because then he could continue to use that into his conspiracy thing. So I don't think it really hurts him really at all to take the loss.
Now,
and you can also say, you can make the point, because Owens has had such a tough run with the Reigns feud, and he kept losing and losing and losing, that he probably needed to win worse than Sami Zayn did.
Yeah, I guess you could say both of them needed it. So whoever got it was good for them. We'll see where they go. Like I said, we'll see where they move on in regards to the upcoming weeks and where the Sammy documentary goes, who might be next for him. I mean, I think that, him versus like a Cesaro or, a Shinsuke Nakamura might be an interesting next step for him, or because, it's an interesting, who's that next baby face that he could face, who's at not the main event level, but who's that right below, who would be a good thing, because you're not going to have him go right back to to Big E. He's not, who's that next guy in the ring of SmackDown guys on the babyface side that would be a good person for him to feud with. I think maybe a Nakamura or a Cesaro coming off the win, unless Cesaro is going to be your next guy going up against Reigns.
Yeah, I think Cesaro's got bigger plans. I don't think you beat Seth. Listen, I love Sami Zayn. I don't think you beat Seth Rollins, who's been a main eventer, and then go against Sami Zayn. I don't think that's what happens. So I think it's bigger things in line for Cesaro.
No,
so maybe
right.
maybe a Nakamura. It'll be a mid card. It'll be a mid card feud. I think the big thing is that he's trying to get this storyline over, the conspiracy thing. So that payoff will be what's interesting. It doesn't matter to me too much who he's facing. It's like, how do they really pay off this conspiracy theory movie and storyline and where does that go to? So that's the thing I'll be curious about, because the two big champions on SmackDown are heels. Another reason why you would want to have Owens win, because maybe he can go against Apollo Crews at some point. So yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Jake Hibbert, for once, someone actually agrees with me in the chat. Jack Hibbert saying Sammy got jobbed for no reason. Love KO, but Sammy needed win more. But where did this feud go from here? It'll be interesting. And Cesaro needs a big push. These good points by Jake. Jake, I actually think that Cesaro might get the next shot at Roman Reigns, which we'll get to a little bit later on in regards to that big match.
Yeah, I absolutely think Cesaro is in line.
But the next match on the card from tonight was Sheamus versus Riddle. This kind of reminds me of night one, a match that I think over-delivered, and a match that I really didn't care about going in, with guys who I thought could really deliver, basically in the way of Seth Rollins and Cesaro. I think Cesaro and Seth Rollins was a better match than Sheamus and Riddle, but it kind of had the same feel of guys who are really good, but the storyline going into the match, I couldn't care less. And I think we kind of said that in our preview, where, these are really good guys, but do we really care about the match? And, Sheamus winning the title, I think it's kind of a reward for the idea that I think he was originally slated to face Drew McIntyre for the title at Mania, and they changed their mind.
Was he?
It seemed like it was going to be Drew versus Sheamus, and all of a sudden it just got dropped, and they went with Bobby Lashley. It seemed like that was the feud, and he never even got his title shot.
I guess, probably. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, I think the only thing I didn't like about the match was, what were they doing with the birds there? Like the graphics there, they need to calm down on these graphics. Like with the birds, when Matt Riddle did the flipping of the flip-flops, like what are they doing? But I thought the match was good.
Interactive experience with, I guess, the their places they now do the shows.
No, that was for us. We're the one. That's for TV. Yeah, that's not for the crowd. The crowd doesn't see that. That's for television. They put that graphic in for television. So I don't know what they were doing, but the match was good. Those guys have really good chemistry. They've wrestled on Raw a bunch, and they've had some really, really good matches. So I was excited for it. It was a very good match. There were a couple of rough spots. Sheamus was going to do the white noise from the top rope and kind of slipped. Matt Riddle slipped once or twice. So maybe the ropes were kind of, I don't know, it was weird. But overall, it was a good match. Riddle's gimmick is so horrible, but he's so good in the ring, And so I hope they kind of figure something out with him, because I feel like this is all Vince with him. I feel like this is all a Vince thing with writing for him. And so, I feel like it's like a rib for Vince, but whatever. It is what it is. But the match was good. I think Sheamus deserved it. I said this on Twitter too. I think since Sheamus has come back from I thought it was concussion. I don't know what it was, but he was gone for a long time. Since he's come back, some of the storylines they've given him have been goofy, with the Jeff Hardy storyline and he's a drunk or whatever, the Drew McIntyre thing. I think they've done some funny things with him storyline wise, but I think in terms of consistent pay-per-views, television matches, you said since the Big E feud.
Since the Big E feud with Sheamus.
Well, his first feud back was Jeff Hardy.
Right, that was really bad. But I think
No, the matches were good. I mean, his feuds have all been pretty much bad. Not all of them. The storylines have not been good for a lot of his feuds. And so, I mean, his matches with Jeff Hardy were really good. Even that barroom brawl match was fun. It was a good match. I disagree. It was a good match, and his matches on pay-per-view with him were good. So in terms of just his in-ring run,
mm-hmm.
I think he's been one of the best guys in the company in ring since he's returned from his injuries. I think it's been the best run of his career in terms of in-ring. He hasn't been given the best stories and, not the most pushes, but he's been great. And he deserved the IC or the US title for sure. And, we'll see what they do with it. I'm sure there'll be some rematches with him and Riddle. They can do a lot with them because those guys have good chemistry. And, we'll see where they go with him, but good for him getting the title win.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll see this on WWE Backlash.
All these matches are going to be on Backlash. All these matches are going to be on Backlash. Although interesting to note, Corey, there's 5 weeks in between Mania and Backlash. So I wonder if they are going to do some, they're going to do some old storylines, but I wonder if they're going to do some new storylines. I mean, we'll talk about the triple threat match, but I don't know that Reigns goes against either one of the, maybe we'll talk about it when we get there, I guess. But 5 weeks in between the show, I think is interesting.
Yeah, I do think that, like I think this will be a rematch, but I could see, a couple other things here that could be changing. Next, we had Apollo Crews for the 7th time trying to win the Intercontinental title versus Big E in a Nigerian drum match. Match went a little bit over 7 minutes. Once again, we had another title change and the re-debut of standout, to put it nicely, of Raw Underground, and who lost to Braun Strowman in about 30 seconds. Badakedo, I might be pronouncing that wrong, who looks like he's going to be coming back as Commander Azar, a name that they trademarked recently, WWE. Ryan Satin has said that, from what his sources are saying, that's more than likely is going to be his new name. I thought the match was fine. I thought both of them worked very hard. I thought some of the spots with the steps were a little dangerous looking, but I'm sure everything was fine there. I think they have very good chemistry. I wish that it didn't take so long for them to get to this point. I mean, I think that both guys, was a nice step for them. And I think Big E will most likely get the title back sooner than later. Because I know that you put on Twitter that you think that Big E lost the title so that within like the next year, he might be, a main event guy. But I think short term, he's going to be still feuding for this title. And I don't think it's
I did not say that he lost the title so that he can move up to win the world title. I think he lost the title because they wanted Apollo Crews to get the run. I think he was very, very protected because the plans for him are, Corey, I mean, he had to get like a finisher put on him to, after basically he had the match won. He beat Apollo Crews like 8 times in a row. And then the only way Apollo Crews beat him was by interference. So, I don't know. I think they really, really protected Big E, which I think is a really good sign for him moving forward. I'm happy for Apollo Crews winning. We'll see what they do with Dabba-Kato. Again, maybe it's going to be kind of an AJ thing. You have the big guy there protecting him. And, Corey, that's a formula they've done in wrestling forever, and I think it's a formula that works. I like the idea of Dabba-Kato, who looked okay on Raw Underground. If that's, I don't even know if you can look okay on there. I think Dabba-Kato is it's a great way to develop him, to have him be, to be Cruz's kind of right-hand man and protect him and look out for him. Great way to keep the heat on Apollo Crews. Great way for Dabba-Kato to, or whatever they're calling him, Commander Azar. Great way for him to kind of get himself established and get his feet wet in, actual wrestling, not whatever the hell Raw Underground was. So, Corey, we rip the WWE for a lot of stuff all the time. But I think they really booked the show both nights like really well. They really did. I don't know if Vince got an epiphany or someone got in his ear, or I don't know what it was, but I think it was a really what my only criticism really was I don't have that many. Bayley not being on the show was really my biggest criticism, but I mean it was a very, very well booked show. The only thing with this match is why was that match 7 minutes, but the tag match was 14 minutes? You couldn't have done, 8 minutes. I mean, I guess it took Nia Jax 5 minutes to get onto the second rope. So maybe that's what the issue was. But, could they have maybe made that match 8? Why that match need to be 14 minutes? And then you do, a longer match for the, for the IC title. But, whatever, neither here nor there. I think the right guy won. And I'm very curious to see what they do moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, we all know why. She's The Rock's cousin. That's the answer. Well, it's my answer for everything. Why she has a job, but maybe she'll get better in the next decade or two. She can't get much worse. But moving on, and I guess this will be the last time we get to really get to say this because there aren't any more African American people on the show. But I will say that every African American person in the company who was on either of these two nights, I think all performed really well, and no one was, how do I put this? There wasn't anything that was on these two nights of the usual Vince McMahon stuff that you could say was done that could be considered, in bad taste, or maybe leave a bad taste.
He hasn't done that. He hasn't done that. I don't think he's done that in a while. I think they've done way better on that stuff. I don't whatever right there. I think they can't do that stuff anymore. I mean, they're a PG company. They're publicly.
I'm just saying, like,
they're a publicly traded company. They can't. Yeah, they can't do that stuff anymore. Beyond that, that's we want to keep things looking good. That's whatever. The important thing is that they actually pushed and highlighted and empowered Black superstars. That's the big thing. You had Bianca and Sasha, whether they were in the first match or the last match. It was great they were in the main event. That's the political, thing to make, whatever for the company. But the fact they gave them 20 minutes and they kicked ass. That was the great thing. The fact that you had Cruz and Big E, and I think was, maybe they had one or two many matches, but the feud was really good. And it did a great job of highlighting Apollo Crews. So I think you can criticize the WWE for a lot of things, but what they've done with the African-American superstars and highlighting them, even almost got a run there. He won the tag title. So they really have done a great job of highlighting Black superstars and not doing it in a stereotypical way. I think it's been absolutely fantastic. Even like I said, and we talked about this before, even Apollo Crews is not looked at as like he's like talking about being a Nigerian prince. It's not like I'm from Nigeria and I'm doing weird magic like they've done with like guys from Africa in the past. So I think they've done a great job with stories. Maybe they're actually listening to the wrestlers. And so maybe that's been a big part of the change too. So good for them.
Absolutely. So we're down to the final two matches of night two of WrestleMania. Rhea Ripley versus Asuka. Asuka, as we've spoken about many times, not pushed very well since winning the title at Money in the Bank last year. I thought this was a very good match. Only 13 and a half minutes, I believe this match went. I think this match could have gone a little bit longer. I thought they made Rhea Ripley look like a star from having the intro, her song done, live performance and everything else. I don't think it was a great performance personally. If you're watching the video of this, Jay would agree with me without saying the words. But I think this could be a feud that we see for a while. I think Asuka made her look really good. I think Rhea didn't. One of the things that I know that she was in the main event and maybe the best match of WrestleMania last year with no crowd, but I think it's a little bit different on that big stage with the crowd than just being in an empty warehouse. And it didn't seem like for either her or Bianca Belair, either a night one or night two, that it was too big of a scene for her. And sometimes you wonder on the biggest stage of them all, will someone who's never been in that big of a setting, will it seem like too big of a thing? And I think
Well,
it really
they're wrestling Asuka and Sasha. They're like two of the 5 best women's wrestlers in the world. I mean, they're not wrestling, Nia Jax, you know what I mean, and Mandy Rose. I mean, they're wrestling, Hall of Famers. So I think that also helps. And Rhea Ripley's very good. I mean, she's wrestled in big crowds before. I think, Court, what do you think about this? 'Cause this is the one thing I said this on Twitter too. I know Rhea Ripley's been a heel, and that's how she came. I think she was the Mae Young tournament. She was a heel, but I've enjoyed her more in this kind of tweener / babyface role. And I don't love her as a heel, and maybe they'll do better with establishing her character. But especially in that WrestleMania moment, I felt like that was a good moment to talk about the fact she lost last year and to really get into her loss last year. And they didn't need to make her this big baby face, but they could have talked a little bit about more Asuka being aggressive and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. I didn't love that part of it. So yeah, she's a champion, but what the hell are you going to do with her as a champion? And what's her character going to be moving forward? And so yeah, what are your thoughts there?
I think that's one of the downfalls of, as much as we wanted to see her come up right after she had given the rub to Raquel Gonzalez with NXT, the initial idea was for her to come up the night after WrestleMania. And then with everything happening with Charlotte, with, the false positive with the pregnancy test and the COVID, this was basically, like, I think it was plan C. And I think plan A, I guess, was, the stuff with Lacey Evans and everything else, that, this wasn't the initial idea for them to be facing each other at WrestleMania. So I don't know how much her character was truly fleshed out on the main roster. So
yeah, but why have her be a heel though? Like she's being kind of a heel. They could have told a very simple story of her cutting a promo or two talking about what happened last year and that she wanted to avenge her loss last year. They didn't need to get into her like attacking her. I don't know. I feel like, yeah.
I think because if you mention Charlotte, then there's the bigger question to the audience of why isn't Charlotte there? If you don't mention Charlotte at all, then it's just like, all right, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Because if you think about it, I missed it.
Corey, I think Corey, this is pro wrestling. Like, this is about stories. This is about people avenging losses. This is about, like, you don't mention her, because then if you don't mention her, people won't think about her. People would chant CM Punk. People chanted CM Punk for 4 years after he left. Right?
Yeah,
it wasn't out of sight, out of mind for like 5 years.
Yeah, but I think there's a little bit different thing of Rhea Ripley, who's been in the business for like 5 years, and CM Punk, who was the biggest.
No, you're talking about Charlotte. What I'm saying is Charlotte's presence is there. Just because she's not on the show doesn't mean people are like, oh, I wonder what happened to Charlotte. I'm sure people are. I wonder what happened to Charlotte. I think mentioning that she is a wrestler in the WWE. He was not on the show. I think is fine. I mean, that might be the WWE stance, because I know that they're real funny with COVID, and maybe there's issues going on with Charlotte. But I still don't think she didn't even have to like mention the person. She could have said, I lost last year to this mystery blonde, long-haired woman. I mean, right? You could have said anything. Right. I just felt like even in the 2 weeks, they could have done a better job of telling that story. And
I think also part of the problem is you basically only had 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks to build this. And also, but you could say the same thing about out of nowhere, it was a story about, respect between two strong women on SmackDown, and all of a sudden it turned into Sasha Banks turned into a jealous heel. So I mean, the way that they do storytelling 95% of the time is it's got to be a babyface versus a heel. It can't just be a thing of respect of two baby faces, facing each other. So their way of storytelling is heel versus babyface.
But that's not a good excuse, Sasha, it is, because that's been Sasha's character for the whole time on the main roster. She's always kind of been a heel, and then she'll turn baby. Like we're just waiting for her to turn heel. So that makes sense for her character. We don't know enough about Rhea Ripley to be doing that type of stuff. I think what you're saying is right. I don't agree that that's what they should have done.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just looking at, kind of logically of where previous history of why they mostly did something.
Yeah, I agree.
The
Yeah,
storyline
no.
should have been redemption, not I'm going to be the badass. Just because I look like a little bit of a goth chick possibly, or wearing a heavy metal chick because I this or that I've got to be the badass in this situation. I'm going to attack Asuka. It should have just been a respect thing and a redemption of what that I lost my title last year because I was overconfident against Charlotte, and I'm coming in and I want to go and be there and be, supposedly the best woman in the company, basically the greatest champion in the history of NXT. I'm coming from NXT as the badass. I lost the title last year. I want to come in, prove that, you were undefeated your whole time there. I'm considered one of the best there. I want this shot.
Yeah, I think they tried to do that a little bit in a video package, so but I don't think they got there. You talk about another woman who never wins these matches at WrestleMania. Between Asuka and Sasha, they never win these matches at WrestleMania. A lot of blondes win at WrestleMania, but not really with Sasha and Asuka. I thought the match itself was good. That the song was, they really needed some work there on the song. By the way, Wale was awesome. I really enjoyed Wale he was really, really good with Big E's song. That's a really good entrance song. Definitely mess up with the audio there. It just was not good. The match itself was good. I didn't think it hit the heights that like I was hoping for. And that that happens with two good wrestlers. Sometimes they just don't. It just doesn't work out. But again, it was a good match, so it wasn't like, oh my god, this is terrible. But so it was still solid, but I was expecting more.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I like the match a lot. I think that for the first time working together, I think it worked out pretty well. Our main event of the night, triple threat. I think the match that most people over the two nights, and maybe the most looked upon or most people thought about match over all of WrestleMania week. The triple threat match for the Universal title, Roman Reigns, Daniel Bryan, and Edge, who 10 years ago to this date had retired because of injury, had to give up the title he'd never lost, the SmackDown title. Whole time, I wish that was kind of more of the storyline going in. A little backstory here. Jay actually told me on Saturday to watch Talking Smack, and I kind of saw it, rewatched it a second time because I don't think I got the full effect because I was actually getting ready to leave work when I saw it. Watched it again, got the full value. Really one of the better segments they've done in Talking Smack in a while. Really great build for this match. I think the match really delivered. 21 minutes, 41 seconds. Roman Reigns wins. I think everyone had their moments. I really think it was the match of the night. I don't know if it's the match of the weekend. I think most likely for me, the Bianca Belair match versus Sasha Banks is mostly my favorite match of WrestleMania weekend. Jay, you can comment on that a second. But before that, what was your thoughts overall on the Roman Reigns triple threat match? And do you think the right guy won?
I think the right guy definitely won. I think the idea is to continue to establish Roman Reigns as this unstoppable monster. And then when he gets beat by someone, it'll be a really, really big deal. I think before Roman Reigns was protected, and you're like, this doesn't make sense. He shouldn't be this protected. But now the story is that he's supposed to be protected. And this is the thing that you and I and many in the wrestling community have been saying. Do a storyline where you're basically the authority. It basically is the authority. And essentially, like, that's what they've done in kind of a very creative way. And so this is like the first time he won at WrestleMania in the main event, where I feel like it was really well. I don't want to say deserved. Deserve is a hard word because these guys all work hard or whatever, but I felt like it was the right time or the right decision for him to win the title. And I really felt like it was the right decision for him to win the title and the right move for him, or to keep the title, I should say. And I think he's going to keep the title through SummerSlam. Maybe we could see a Brock Lesnar at some point get involved. Would not be surprised to see that. But Yeah, I mean, it was a great match. It really was. And they told you that this was foreshadowed by both Bryan, by Edge, by Reigns, you know, at the Talking Smack. So for you guys who didn't watch Talking Smack, essentially Heyman hugged Edge at the end and said, "I'm sorry for what's going to happen to you. I'm sorry for what Reigns is going to do to you." And, I mean, and they essentially said the same thing to Bryan, and they both got concertoed. And so, and we'll see where they go with those guys. I don't expect to see either one of those guys on SmackDown for a while. Who the hell
Yeah,
knows?
you'll see them both. It's
Yeah. Who knows the WWE? They don't do a good job. But I mean, you had one guy who had a retired because of his neck, and one guy retired because of concussions, and they both put those issues on display with the concerto. So I would expect those guys to be out for a little while, and I think that really would be the best way to go. But WWE does some funny stuff sometimes, so we'll see. But I thought it was a very good match. Thought it told a good story. I think everybody was highlighted, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And I guess the other part I asked you there, I don't know if you remember, was this your favorite match of the two nights?
Oh, Bianca Sasha was my favorite match of the two nights. Yeah, I think Bianca and Sasha, and I really enjoyed the Rollins Cesaro match. I thought they worked it was such a fun match with guys with just great chemistry. So that was really, I think those two may have been my favorite matches. But yeah, I really enjoyed a lot of the matches on the show. I mean, there were very few. I think night 2 had better wrestling matches in my opinion. But I think maybe night 1 was more fun with Bad Bunny. People were like, "Oh my God, Bad Bunny, like what's going on?" So I think night 1 was more fun and more history making, and more like impactful. But I think night 2 had better wrestling matches. But in WrestleMania, it's not about matches, it's about moments. And I think night 1 had more moments. And I think that's why people look at it better. And I totally get that. But
yeah, quickly asking in the chat, both Jacob Anthony Moses, once again from the Step Back, and also Alex Mercado, both saying that night 1 was a much better show. So they're with a little bit more of the majority of the quick thoughts on this.
I think I do think night 1 was a better show. Like it was a better show.
Mhm.
I don't think it was a better card of wrestling matches, but I think it was a better show. So, I mean, that's kind of half, whatever, right?
Half in, half out, yeah.
Half in, half out, right? 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That's the saying. That's what I was trying to think of. So, but yeah. So, and I pretty much agree with that too. But I thought, they had the WrestleMania moment, and I know we should just transition to this because I know you wanted to talk about night 1 a little bit. Bianca was crying before the match even started. And I know you mentioned, last night on the podcast a little bit with, the women, Morton's Law podcast, the women kind of get more emotional than the men do in these spots, and women controlling their emotion. But here's the thing, Corey. Women have never been in these spots in the history of professional wrestling. This is like incredible. What they're doing is, it's not the Edge coming back from an injury. Like that's obviously a big deal, and that's great for him. And you saw the emotion on his face when he was coming down the ramp. This is, you're in the main event. This is the history, how Black people have been treated in pro wrestling and Black women have been treated. We saw Jazz retire yesterday on Impact Wrestling, right? Like she always talks about how she was treated kind of, not great toward the end with the WWE. So this is such a big deal, I think. And is Bianca Belair not the biggest baby fan? I mean, she just seems like a great person, and she seems so real. She's great on the mic. And so I think, that was the WrestleMania moment. Her winning at the end was, and and the one thing about that match that I love when they tell stories in matches, and the whole story of the match was the hair, and Sasha like messing with her hair the whole time, and messing with her hair and using it as a weapon, and she kept using the hair, and in the end, Bianca turned it around, and people were like, "Oh, was that like edited in?" I'm like, no, that you haven't watched many Bianca matches, because when she hits people with it, like it hurts.
Yeah.
And so the idea of her using that hair and whipping the hell out of her and then winning the match, I thought they told such a good story. I think Sasha sold so hard for her. And if anybody's like, oh, Sasha, I don't know about her, she is absolutely incredible. Man or woman, she is one of the best wrestlers in the world. Absolutely.
She's absolutely the best women's wrestler on the main roster. It's not even close.
And what she did for Bianca and how generous she was in giving up so much. It was so great. It was such a great match.
Oh, and just you were saying anything about the hair. I don't know if they'll ever do it. And I know that women's hair is very important, a lot more than men, because men shave their hair all the time. But the ultimate heat that some woman will get at some point, if you do an angle where someone chops off her hair to get heat, that will be one of the biggest things in her career, where she's got to come off, and that's going to be her getting a revenge or something else. I think that's especially in wrestling, you do hair, those type of things where someone's going to chop off her, cut her hair.
This is a Mexico, Corey. This isn't the hair versus masks match, all right? But I do think eventually that is something they can do, like a WrestleMania match, like a grudge match where she's not for the whatever, who cares? But yeah, I thought that match was great. I thought Bad Bunny was fantastic.
Over delivered by a ton here.
I can't believe he was as good as he was.
And now he's going good for him.
Yeah, apparently Damian Priest was hurt, and that's why he wasn't super involved in the match. Because I think you and I both said, like, this is where you want to see Damian Priest do some stuff. But if he was hurt, that makes a lot of sense. He didn't really get any shine off of it, but whatever. The Strowman match, I mean, I can't, the story was so bad going in. I just had.
You're stupid. I'm stupid. We're all stupid.
Yeah, I just had such negative thoughts, whatever.
Our program. Yeah, good job.
The AJ match, I thought it was fun. I thought it was a fun match. It wasn't like this great show or this great match, but I thought they did a good job of telling telling a good story. And I'm kind of just going through these matches real quick. I already told you Cesaro and Seth was interesting. So I think Cesaro might have a kind of world title, not a run here, but I think he might have a feud for the world title. Usually they do this, right? They'll have, an up and comer like they did Lashley last year, fight for the world title and not win it. And so I could see a feud. Do you think that's where they go? Who do you think Reigns' next opponent is? Let's say it's not Edge or Bryan and they're concussed and out for a while. Who do you see as his next opponent? Because I don't think he'll lose to whoever that is. So it's got to be someone who is going to get some shine off him.
I think it's one of two people. It's either Nakamura or Cesaro. It's one of the two, because you could still build off of Nakamura had won that gauntlet or battle royal, and then Jey Uso cost him. They never paid off on that match. Or Cesaro coming off the big victory. He feels like the hottest person on the SmackDown brand coming off, and I don't think you go back to Kevin Owens right away. So I think he's the next obvious choice, and I think you can go 1 or 2 months before you're ready to do something, the rematch, the one-on-one match with Edge at SummerSlam. I think that's where, as a placeholder, and I think that's the most important thing here. You can't, and I think I said this on Chris Moore's podcast yesterday. If this is just, Lifetime Achievement Award for Cesaro, that we'll give you a win at WrestleMania if you resign, and then we're going to do nothing with you for the next 3 years, then this is a waste of time. If this is him getting to the next level and occasionally, every once in a while, being in a main event or the second to the top match, that's great. But like I said, if he just goes back to being a mid-card guy who every once in a while is a headliner on a random SmackDown, when Roman Reigns is only doing talking segments, this means nothing. It's a nice moment.
I agree. The follow-up for all this stuff will be interesting, and that's where the WWE struggles. That is where they struggle. So we'll see. Who do you think Bianca's next challenger is going to be? Let's say, she beats Sasha in a rematch, yada yada yada. I mean, they could do Bayley.
I think it is. It's Ding Dong.
Yep, they could do ding dong. Let's talk about Bayley for a second, and then we can talk about the returns and whatever, because I know we've been going already a little bit.
A few more moments left here. Yeah.
Man, Bayley she was really funny, and she's kind of coming to her own as this like kind of goofy heel character. And I mean, she's fantastic. I mean, I think she talked about it on Renee's Paquette's podcast that they just didn't have anything for her, and that does happen. But I don't know if you're the one who said it or someone said, like, if this is Charlotte, that they wouldn't say that. I mean, Charlotte, we don't know her status. I think there might be something going on with her. But if this is Charlotte or Roman Reigns or whatever, or even Nia Jax, it wouldn't be like, oh, we don't have anything for you. But Bayley, who did such a great job during the pandemic with her and Sasha carrying the women's division, to not put her in any match. Yay.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 MVPs you could even say just not women's, but 3 MVPs of wrestling for WWE during the first half of the pandemic era were Sasha, Bayley, and Asuka. Those were the
Drew.
And Drew. Absolutely. Those were the 4. But I'm saying, those were the 3 women who were basically on pretty much on every show. You want to say a little bit Kyrie, but she was kind of like a background player. But I mean, you had Asuka on commentary, you had them on commentary, you had them feuding. I mean, they were basically, for the first half of the year, I thought that was going to be the, one half of the main event. And it turned out they made the right decision, because you had the big moment with Belair and they had a great match. But the idea that all you had for one of your best performers, a person who went from the hugger gimmick to this role model gimmick to something else now, which is the next stage, all she did was basically hang out with the legends and made to look silly. And the end result was to get punched out by someone who may not be medically cleared to even compete in the Bellas. I just think that's a waste of time. I don't know if something fell through with Becky Lynch, or the fact that, the Wrestling Observer went and found out that supposedly there was going to be a ding dong segment at WrestleMania with Becky Lynch coming out. And maybe because it came out, they decided to scrap it, or maybe something happened where Becky Lynch wasn't available at the last minute. But that would have been one heck of a segment. But if you have nothing to do with her, figure something out. She doesn't have to wrestle on the show, but she shouldn't just be the butt of jokes. I understand she's a heel, but you got to do something more. Maybe you do something with Io Shirai, who online said, her dream, she would have loved to face her at WrestleMania, or, and maybe that's who comes up and faces, Bianca Belair next. That's how Io Shirai comes up right away, and she gets called up on Friday.
Would you? Okay, let me ask you this: would you have rather seen Bayley do what she did, or would you have rather seen her in the tag team turmoil match and lose the match with someone else?
So it's a guarantee she would have lost. I mean, if it was her,
yeah. Let's say. I mean, we know Nia Jax was gonna win the title. So So right. I mean, it seemed like they had that as a plan. So would you have rather? And plus, it would have been Bayley and a makeshift person, and that would have been goofy anyway.
Well, if it was her and Carmella as a tag team, going off of their history together from NXT and everything, maybe I think that could have been interesting. Or you would have rather had her in a tag team turmoil match and lose, winning it, and then maybe lose, and then losing on the second night, and she's doing 2 nights worth of stuff. Maybe.
Yeah, but the way they've built up Natalya and Tamina, that doesn't make sense. We all knew Natalya and Tamina were going to win. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for Bayley. I wouldn't have had Bayley win that match. If I put her in that match and I was the booker, I wouldn't have had her win that match. I would have had Tamina and Natalya. They haven't ever had a moment at WrestleMania. And I think that was part of the process going in. Part of this was Natalya's been someone who's been a stalwart of the women's division and has helped these women develop for years, and she wanted to get her moment. So again, I'm going to say, would you have rather had her be in a tag team turmoil match and lost the match or have the segments that she was in?
I think she would have helped those matches if she was at least in it. I think it would have been a better match. So yeah,
I do not think so. She was part of a match with 18 other women, and the match was a slug and whatever. I don't think she would have. I don't think she would have helped the match.
But she actually someone who knows how to work really well. She might have been able to actually make that match, at least more.
How? There were like 8 women in the match. There were so many people in the match. There wasn't one person who was going to make the match good. There were a million women in the match. She was going to be, she would have been a little part of the match. So you're saying you would have rather had her. And again, I'm just kind of doing devil's advocate.
Oh, no, you're doing what I did.
That would have been her role. So you would have been better off with her being in this tag team turmoil match.
Yeah, her and Carmella.
Maybe she gets a spot in there. She loses the match, and then she has no other segments. I think that's interesting. I think that's interesting.
Or I would have had her at least do more segments on the show with other people and maybe setting up, or maybe, you know what? She's at the end of the show, she has some sort of interaction where she gets laid out by Bianca Belair, where she's trying to be this character and she tries to ruin Bianca's moment, and Bianca just takes her out at the end.
I think that's honestly, other than the fact that she wasn't on the show, that's my biggest problem. Is why not have her, talk crap about Bianca and Bianca hit her or something but again, maybe things fell through, whatever. It is what it is. All right.
I have 2 things.
Go ahead.
One, I'm going to get in my soapbox for 2 seconds here. I said this in our, in the Wrestling Life thread that we were going through tonight. I don't know how much you saw of it or not. I
was in there the whole time.
Okay.
Workshoot Wrestling Podcast? You don't recognize that. Go ahead.
But I'm sorry, but how many, and we had Nelson Torres from the WTF TV who was at Wrestlemania, and we hope to have him on in the next couple of weeks to try to talk about his experience at Wrestlemania this year. He put a video up, which I shared, of the protocol. Everyone's wearing masks as they came in, and he showed, everybody doing everything. Then all of a sudden you see, and I understand it's the state of Florida, and it's, basically you do whatever you want there, but everyone's, doing everything they're supposed to doing. And then all of a sudden what I'm seeing is pretty much every shot of everyone in that audience doesn't have a mask on. What is the point of having people wearing masks as they get in the building if you're not going to enforce? And I understand if someone's drinking something, but I'm just seeing everyone behind the hard camera, everyone behind Michael Cole is not wearing a mask. And I've become too big of a thing with everything going on in this country, with people dying left and right, that it's affected me more. But the idea of people not wearing masks, and the idea that it didn't look like they were social distancing that much, people on the floor, what are they doing? And I know the UFC is 100% worse when they're having an indoor show with capacity. And I know that we're not a UFC podcast, so that's not something we're going to really talk about here, but that just really bothered me, the idea that every time we saw somebody without a mask. Jay, if you don't want to comment, you don't have to, but that was just.
No, I didn't think about that, but I did think about, like, man, everybody's really close. It reminded me like they brought everyone down from, the high up part of the arena to get more people. Mm-hmm. But man, everybody seemed really close. I'm like, that's interesting, because we've seen crowds, but we've never seen people that close. So definitely interesting. And friends of ours, my wife's and I live in Florida, and we saw them a couple of weeks ago. One of them got the vaccine. They got both shots. The other person, her husband, wasn't eligible yet. But I mean, they're basically saying, like, a lot of people in Florida are not even getting the vaccine, so that's eligible to them. So I don't know, man. It is what it is. But hopefully, cases are rising in a lot of places. Chicago cases are rising. So
in Michigan,
so hopefully, we gotta look out for each other and take care of each other.
Absolutely. And my other thing was, just quickly, like I said, overall, I thought it was a good 2 nights, actually a pretty good week overall for the WWE, as we go into, our new schedule of basically wrestling every day. Tuesday will be the start of NXT. Thursday we'll have Impact, still have, Wednesday, MLW and AEW. What's your quick thoughts before we call it a day for this show, unless you have something else? the landscape of wrestling right now, do you think it's just going to, do you think people are going to go and basically, especially on Tuesday and Wednesday, with the Wednesday Night War basically done, do you think all these NXT fans or the AEW fans, they could all go together and we could have 1.3 million people every week or somewhere around there watch on Tuesdays and Wednesday?
No, because you didn't have 1.3 million watch every time. The ratings are what? You can watch something for 15 minutes and watch something else for 15 minutes, and the ratings count for both things, right? So I don't think it's 1.3 million. I mean,
Well, I'm just saying, are you going to get?
I guess we'll find out. I think it's a lot of the same people watching the shows. I think the difference of of people watching the shows might be 100,000 people. So I think, do we get a million? I think is the question. And
Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think maybe when you have a big show, when AEW does these gimmicks where they have these celebrities on, I think so. I think NXT will kind of have their usual standard audience, and then when they have a big show, and I think they might stick more to their old, WWE Network NXT formula where they don't do such big shows for TV and they stick more to takeovers. We'll see. But I get, who knows, man. These ratings are really, really hard for me to figure out, like why, because NXT won tonight, yet they had Peacock available. So I think it's very, very interesting. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Do we see this week? Do we see who gets? Give me one or two calls from NXT and tell me, do we see Ronda Rousey or Becky Lynch this week? Don't give me some long diatribe. NXT call-ups, and do we see Ronda Rousey and or Becky Lynch? And tell me if we see one or both of them.
I don't see I just can't see the idea at the Performance Center or wherever it is. We see anybody. I don't see we see either one of them come up. I think there's a good chance we see Io come up, and I think there's a 50-50 chance we see Adam Cole.
Now, remember, they're going to be in the Thunderdome till like July. So you're saying now we're not going to see any of these. They're not going to see Ronda Rousey or Becky Lynch till July.
I'm saying this week.
Yeah, but you're saying they're going to be back in the Thunderdome. You're saying but they're in the Thunderdome until July.
I think there's a chance we see Brock Lesnar on Monday. I don't think we see Becky Lynch or.
But you specifically said because they're going to be back in the Thunderdome, but they're going to be there for a while. They're not going to have a live crowd for a long time.
But I think that if you have a Ronda Rousey or a Becky Lynch come back, you do that in front of a crowd. I think.
They're not going to have a crowd, so they're not going to have them come out until July. That's what you're saying.
That's okay. If you do it then,
okay.
I don't see what the gain is of just getting a random rating on a Monday or Friday when you could have done it for this huge audience in front of a crowd and then put it on SportsCenter. I just don't see how it really works when you already have your TV deals already in place. Why you don't do it in front of a crowd? Doesn't make sense to me.
We are Worked Shoot Wrestling Podcast. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Just type in Worked Shoot Wrestling Podcast. You will find us. We are also on Twitter and Instagram. I did a lot of live shooting the last couple of days, more than I've done in like a long time. And it was actually a lot of fun because the shows were good. It's like slogging through some shitty Raw and trying to live tweet. I'm just angrily tweeting the whole time. So this is actually pretty fun. So at Worked Shoot Pod on Twitter, at Worked Shoot Pod on Instagram as well. The great Jackie Endy helps us run that. Monday, we're a part of the Great Life Group podcasts, and I really mean that. The podcasts are really, really good. A lot of great guys involved. Monday, we've got Dong City with Henry and Vince, a baseball podcast, kind of more traditional baseball talk. Tuesdays, we've got the Audible with Matt and Randy. A lot going on with football right now. We got the draft coming up. Thursday, you've got us, Work Shoot Wrestling Podcast. Friday, you've got the Step Back with Jacob and Leon. Jacob, thank you for all your comments. And then Sunday, we've got Total Bases with Felipe and Sean, more of a fantasy podcast. Can they tell me who's going to get saves on any of these freaking teams? I can't even figure that out. So that's us. And check us out, Work Shoot Wrestling Podcast. If this is the first time you're listening to us, we really, really appreciate it. and hope that you will stick with us.
And also a special thanks to Christopher Moran for having me on the podcast last night to do an instant reaction to night 1 of WrestleMania. Be sure to check out the Moran's Law podcast, wherever you check out podcasts. And also, Jay, there is this little comedy podcast that you will be on again at some point in the near future.
Okay, so my wife is sleeping, so I can't say it as loud. You don't know Jackie. You don't know Jackie. Jackie Andy, Jackie Rachel, Jackie Corey.
Oh, no.
Never Jackie Jason, because he hasn't been invited on the show in like 8 months. The comedy podcast for the ages.
Very cool. And like I said, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find us, find them, and also find Moran's Law podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. And it'll be interesting to see where wrestling goes from here as the wars continue, even though not everything is on the same night. So, Jason, as always, I'll give you the final word as we are done with WrestleMania.
One thing, New Japan Strong, try to watch it this week if you guys have a subscription to New Japan World. The first 2 matches were absolutely awesome. With that, I think we're done here. See ya.